Member for Vancouver-Mount Pleasant.
Madam Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his statement. In response to the statement on behalf of the official opposition, we too like to commit ourselves to the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. And as the Minister had stated, this in fact was the fastest negotiated human rights convention in UN's history, and has the highest number of signatories, and of course was also the first time in its history where civil society actively participated in the framing of the negotiations and the text for the convention. Canada, as well, in terms of first, was also the first UN convention wherein Canada actually signed on its opening day. So it is significant in many realms, and I think it speaks to Canadian values as we recognize this day. Now, Canada played a leading role, there's no question, with the development in the principles of the convention consistent with Canadian values and the Canadian Charter. And what are some of those principles, Madam Speaker? They included, of course, the principle of equality and non-discrimination, equal recognition before the law, and the rights to inclusive education. In other words, many of the elements that are needed to ensure that we all recognize as equal citizens in our communities. Going forward to the convention, the key question, in my view, in the opposition's view, of course, are the implementation actions that are required on the key principles. And what are the key 5 principles that were recognized nationally? Disability-related supports, poverty alleviation, labor market participation, access and inclusion, and of course, Canada's international disability leadership. Because of the delivery of these programs rests with the provincial government and territorial governments for the most part, it does mean that BC has to examine our own approach to ensure that we not only meet the standards and the principles that are set out, but rather also strive to be a global leader in this regard. There is no question that disability-related supports has long been of utmost priority for the disability community. Members of this House will recall that the outcry of families and advocacy groups around the province from the developmental disability community actually caused the government to bring forward a review back in September 2011. The issues that they raised were the lack of service supports integration for delivery, the lack of planning, to even non-existent planning for youth with developmental disability transitioning into adulthood, the closure of group homes that we have heard as a major issue, and the flawed assessment tools, amongst others. This led to, of course, the review, although not an independent inquiry, that said there was a review and many recommendations flow from that. The government, of course, are saying that they're moving forward with this, and we in the opposition want to work with the government along with the community to realize all of that. There's no question that the people with developmental disabilities are underrepresented in the labor market, and to date, poverty remains a constant for many with disabilities, and that is something that we need to continue to strive towards to address on the poverty question. People in the community are calling for example, the Federation of Labour is calling for an increase in minimum wages. Others are calling for a living wage. People in the community for a very long time has been calling for an increase in the rates. So there's much work that should be done and that needs to be done. And in the words of the people from the disability community, access and inclusion means what? As the Minister has cited in the Disability White Paper consultation, I too had taken the opportunity to attend some of these events. Let me just put on the record what some of those calls for the community, from the community for the government to act. Access and inclusion means support for activities needed for daily life, help with personal care and housework, assistance to be in the community, to be at work, to access education, recreation, in other words, to be full participants in our community. They're also calling for these principles to be materialized and for support for full participation. Everyone, of course, lives in fear, they say, that the cuts will take place in terms of funding, which, of course, will severely minimize their ability to access the services. Let me just